Well, welcome back, everybody, to Tech Whispers. I'm your host, Dan Roberts, and just really glad for you to be here, especially given my guest today. Our topic is both provocative and it's urgent, featuring the authors of a new book, Leaders Make the Future, 10 New Skills to Humanize Leadership with Generative AI. Lots going on there, and you're going to see why you're glad you tuned in. So, with the rapid rise of GenAI, we're standing on the brink of a leadership revolution. For CIOs and IT leaders, I think about you as I get up in the morning and try to help you be successful. This isn't just about technology. It's really about transforming the way we lead, the way we innovate, the way we disrupt, the way we create value. And so, as someone who's focused the better part of 40 years on developing the human side of the equation, it's a really exciting time for our team here. One of the things we're going to dive into are the 10 leadership skills outlined in the book. And I don't want to spoil it, but we're going to unpack those in a very special way. So joining me today, the three authors, all three, they're in different parts of the world right now, no surprises. Bob Johanssen, you've met Bob before through me, good friend. Bob is a leading futurist at the Institute for the Future, author of many books, 15, maybe 20 books. You met him maybe a year and a half ago with his book, Office Shock, which was really phenomenal about the future of work, the future of officing, which is a new word they created, of course. Jeremy Kirshbaum is the second author. He's the founder of Handshake, which is a generative software studio and research lab. There, they are transforming how to leverage specialized knowledge, frameworks, and craft. And you'll get to know Jeremy here in a minute. Then my good buddy, Gabe Cervantes. Gabe is the director of Scalable Foresight at the Institute for the Future. Gabe works closely with large organizations, helping them foster an environment that encourages the development and application of foresight among the next generation of future leaders. Good stuff. So, Bob, I want to start with you. Welcome back. It's just always amazing to be with you, Bob.
Thank you, Dan.
Yeah. So, Bob, your books in thought leadership and presentations challenge me, I think, like nobody else does. I mean, you push me out so far out of my comfort zone, and I've come to really appreciate that. I've come to trust because I've seen the results and I've seen your work. And so this third edition of Leaders Make the Future, no different. I mean, I've been working through it, plugging away through it. Thanks for the advanced copy. Chapter 1, I mean, just chapter 1 alone is worth the price of admission. Generative AI will be a leadership game changer. So unpack that for us, Bob. And, you say something that really struck me. Gen AI will disrupt senior leaders in profound ways. So I'll let you take it from there.
Sure. And, I grew up with the internet, so that's my comparison to generative AI. And it's going to be of a similar scale. And it's also going to be profoundly more important because the internet was all about connectivity. It began with data communications and then people-people communications, Internet of Things, but it was all about connection. And that's really critical, and it's had a profound effect on leadership. But this is really different. Generative AI is about augmentation. So it's actually not just connecting us, it's messing with our brains. It's augmenting us in different ways. And the really interesting thing about this is generative AI comes to life in conversation. You can't just think about it as a separate technology. You have to combine the tech with the human skill, the human calm, the human clarity, the human repetition of the skills and the art of how we use it.
Yeah, and Bob, you just made me realize too, I want to have you talk about how you get there. Like you have this model, you call it future back thinking, and I've studied a lot with you, and it's fascinating, and you're right a lot. And so, but it's not predictions, right? So what's the difference between future back thinking and a prediction?
Sure. Well, a prediction is saying this will occur. It's what fortune tellers do. It's saying, I predict that this will happen. Nobody can predict the future. So, our general line is nobody can predict the future. If someone tells you they can predict the future, you shouldn't believe them, especially if they're from California. but you can get a clear idea of direction. by talking to experts, by aggregating opinion, by doing scenario planning. But if you think future back, you'll get a much clearer view than if you stay anchored in the present and try to think present forward, because the present is so noisy. We're in a very noisy now, perhaps a historically noisy now. So it's really hard to think future from the present to the future. But if you think future back and then you ask, well, how are leaders going to be augmented? It's clear we're all going to be augmented in some way, or we're going to be out of the game. So this is a really big deal. We're all going to be augmented. But the good news is we have big choices now about how we want to be augmented. And that's what the book is about, to help coach the humans as to how we can use this technology artfully, use it productively, use it humanely, but actually learn the humanistic skills of using the tech to augment ourselves.
So interesting. I love that slang. I want to come back to you here in a minute, Bob. I want to pull Gabe in. Good to see you again, Gabe. I never know where I'm going to see you.
Thanks, Dan. I never know where I'm going to end up, but I'm always happy to jump on and have a conversation, especially with you and your audience. Thanks for including me.
Yeah, yeah, great to have you here. And last time we were together was Nashville. It was a room of very distinguished, brilliant CIOs, CTOs, CXOs, board members. And I asked you a simple favor, if you would just open up your brain and talk about the book a little bit. And I think it was some pretty good market tests, because the questions you got were like rapid fire, really great questions. And so we knew you were on something big there. So um, we know that words matter. Bob just talked about future back, right? Talk about foresight, if you will, and maybe even your role. You're given this title of scalable foresight. What does all that mean?
Yeah, Dan, I think I just need to reiterate what you put so eloquently to begin with, and also what Bob just talked about. But this whole notion that foresight is not about predicting the future. Foresight is about uncovering possibilities. Now, of course, each of us, especially, leaders, CIOs, leaders in our fields, we have to have a plan of how to approach the future, how to move forward into the future. Now, generally speaking, there are just a couple ideas that we carry with us into how the future will unfold. Foresight is about uncovering the other possibilities that perhaps we haven't considered. Foresight is about thinking what's probable, what's possible, what's plausible, and pressure test our strategies, pressure test our plan forward, and say in which ways do our current strategic initiatives, in which ways are they ready for disruptions, in which ways are they not. And so this whole notion of scalable foresight is, that's a big order to ask of someone, to say, look out at all the various possibilities and make a decision. We know that for leaders in particular, that can be overwhelming and paralyzing, especially in the world of today. So the notion of scalable foresight is, if you've got an organization with very smart, very determined, very capable people, why not make them sensors for the future? Why not have them think about other possibilities? And so scalable foresight is figuring out who you go to ask, how much it is you're asking them, in order to look out for those signals of the future, to see what other possibilities could be on the horizon, and how do you pivot. Foresight and scalable foresight is all about resiliency. It's not about accuracy and prediction. It's about resiliency, regardless of whatever disruption comes in the future.
That's so good. You just got every CIO's ear perked up right there, because they're all trying to build that resiliency muscle into their not just technology organization, but their whole company, right? And so that's brilliant. Jeremy, I want to welcome you in. It's been really fun getting to know you through this collaboration and newer friendship. But you're our Gen AI guy. You're our guru. So thanks for being here.
Great to be here, Dan. Thanks for having me.
So you're on the Bay Area, and you've got this. You're doing some really super smart things. You've got this knack of being able to look ahead, look around corners, look at the tech trends, really figure out what's going on. And so, help us understand, dig into this augmentation a little bit more. Give us some more context for the book and Gen AI, and Why should CIOs and leaders overall strive, not just like haphazard, but strive to be augmented?
I really got interested in software when I encountered GPT-2 and BERT, some of the early large language models. I'm a words person. I'm an ideas person. And I've worked with Institute for the Future and Bob for almost a decade now. And love storytelling, love connecting with people. I wasn't that into software when it was buttons and bar charts and things like that. But once it started talking, once I could write poetry, then I really got interested. I could actually interact with a computer in a human way. I could express myself in what felt like a human way. And so that I think is the potential for leaders, is to extend your leadership, amplify your leadership, change your leadership, make it deeper, more powerful, more beautiful in a way that feels really human and through the interface of technology, but a technology that finally gets to us in a way that we can intuitively understand in a deep way. And that to me is there's huge potential for that. It is really compelling and seems like there could be a lot of good in it.
Well, I think the book might catch people off guard a little bit, and you just kind of hit on it, right? It's, Gen AI, yeah, maybe it's a technology, but it's the human dimension, right? And so I consider myself a words guy too, Jeremy. And I've got chat up all day long. It's on this other screen, and I can't believe how often I leverage it and how it makes me think different, better, clearer, cleaner. So good stuff. Gabe, I want to pull you back. I don't know if you remember, there's a chart. We're going to show this table on page 26 of the book. I spent a lot of time thinking about this, studying it, and as folks are looking at it, it's most of us take that present forward view. That's what we know. That's how we know to think. But the way you help me think is that future back lens. So could you cover some of those high points here?
Absolutely, Dan. What we teach at the Institute for the Future is teaching leaders how to shift from present forward thinking to future back thinking. And the reason for that is that present forward thinking, you take one step forward and two paths appear, and you make a decision and you take another step forward and then three paths appear. And there's this lot of, uncertainty of, well, did I make the right choice? The whole notion of future back is jump out to the future and don't worry about the details. Don't worry about the small stuff. Don't worry about who exactly is going to win and how they're going to win. Ask yourself the big picture questions and say, once we've figured this out, once the regulation has gone through, once the dust has settled, once this has become a part of our lives, when the dust settles, what does this actually look like? What is that clarity there? And then you work backwards to say, well, if we know where the end is, how do we fill that space in between? And so that's that whole notion of shifting from present forward to future back. Now, this table that you're seeing here really talks about kind of what we're seeing with generative AI and a lot of the present forward view that you see today, and our take looking future back from 10 plus years into the future. You can see some of them, but we see already how the present forward is so limiting in many different ways. Take for example prompts and answer finding. I mean, I don't know if you remember this, Dan, but I love social media and TikTok and all. Although it has its faults, I do really enjoy seeing how people interact with social media. And I remember just last summer, there was a trend going around where people were going to, ChatGPT or other generative AI bots and asking it, what is 2 plus 2? And the answer it was giving was 3. And then the other trend was asking how many R's there were in the word strawberry. And very confidently, the chatbots and the Gen AI, platforms were saying, well, there's only 2 R's in strawberries and not 3. And so it became this whole question of, or this whole notion of poking fun at this emerging technology and seeding distrust and mistrust in the technology, because the present forward view is we should be using ChatGPT just like we use Google. We type in a prompt, we're looking for a quick answer, and it'll spit it out. We have so many tools, so many other tools that do that for us. Instead, what we should be doing is implementing, shifting from prompts and answer finding to mind stretching conversations. I mean, Dan, you, Bob, and Jeremy have really taught me this of, the conversation with generative AI doesn't get good until an hour in. The really good ideas do not start coming out until you're 30 minutes down a rabbit hole of the conversation. And so the present forward view is, let me get a quick answer. The future back view is, how can I start where I am today and go through a series of questions and answers and poking and prodding and expanding to get to a truly new idea. And I think for CIOs in particular, that's a really exciting and very promising possibility for the future.
Very exciting. You also do a prompt for me at some point, Gabe. And you're right. I mean, I love our conversation. I think we wrote a new book right before we started today. In the half hour, we're just kind of wrapping. So that's pretty fun. But I'd be curious, you talk about present forward, you hit those forks in the road, right? And it made me think of the Yogi Berra-ism. When you come to the fork in the road, take it, right? So your homework, Gabe, is what's the new yogiism in future back thinking, right? It's going to be a whole different joke and a whole different story. Anyways, for a different day.
Dan, I will just say, maybe I can work with ChatGPT or some other Gen AI program, and we'll figure out that answer for you.
Let's get it. Yeah, let's get it.
Well, it's interesting, Dan, to jump in here, it's interesting the examples Gabe gave about how we're trying to tease the technology, how we're trying to trick it. And imagine if you use a conversation model and say it's all going to be about conversation. What if in this conversation we were each saying, well, let me ask a question of Dan that would make him look stupid. We just don't do that when we have human conversation. At least most of us don't.
Right.
But that's kind of what we're doing with the tech right now. But our takeaway is Gen AI only comes to life in conversation, but don't trust it because it's always going to sound confident, even when it's wrong. And, we use it. I've nicknamed my version Stretch that Jeremy developed for me. And it's because it stretches my thinking. I don't go to it for answers. That's not why I go to it. I go to it to have conversations that stretch my thinking. But I also don't trust it. So I think that's the ground rule is we want to figure out how we can humanize the conversation, but also augment it. But some of it is just this kind of silly teasing. We'll get past that quickly, I hope.
I'm hearing all my friends and teammates out there when you said, let's ask Dan questions and make him look stupid. They're all saying, it won't take my spot. Trust me. It's all good. But I love Stretch. You inspired me with Stretch. I call mine Sparky, as you know.
Nice.
Because it really sparks my thinking. So thank you for that. Yeah. Jeremy, you're the master of metaphors. You've got these great ways of explaining these things I think are really helpful for me and others. But talk about Gen AI, the Gen AI era, and compared to the time of the Wright brothers in flight and that whole parallel that you do so well.
Something really interesting right now with generative AI is that we don't have a strong analytical understanding of how it works. Even the people that are making the models can maybe know a bit more about how they work, but they don't really know that much about why they work. And this is often used as a way to make the technology sound unknowable. It's not actually unknowable, it's just unknown. And in fact, you can use the technology safely and usefully without fully understanding it. And a strong predecessor for this was human-powered flight. It it was actually a full 2 decades after the invention of human-powered flight that we had any physics to explain it. The concept of lift was invented a full 2 decades afterward, which, of course, at this point, even that way of describing it is not well regarded. And there's some people that say we still don't have a strong physics to explain why flight works. That even given that we're able to fly safely, we're able to fly widely, we're able to provide lots of safe and useful services to people. And so just because we're still learning what makes this technology possible and why it does what it does, neither makes it a black box nor makes it something that you should avoid on that basis. It's something that we should be careful about, something that we should approach with caution. And I think this testing of its edges, trying to find where it works and doesn't work, is actually pretty useful, as long as you don't use that as proof to yourself that it's then entirely useless. But we shouldn't treat this as something that's wholly new in that way. We often have invented things and started using them before we really understood why they worked.
Yeah, yeah. You've had another, that's a great metaphor. You have another one that kind of brings us closer back to earth, right? But the whole tractor metaphor. So what's the short version of that one, Jeremy?
That was kind of around my own realization with generative AI. When the more large language models came around in 2018 and 2019, I was primarily doing innovation consulting and doing PowerPoints and reports and was doing some prototyping, but it wasn't a big part of my work. And I encountered GPT-2 and BERT, which was the predecessors to GPT-3 and GPT-4 and all of that, and really felt like a farmer with a shovel being shown a tractor. Bob was saying that it's not reliable for answers, but will seem confident anyway. That's what they said about me as a consultant. So it really, but more directly, my job wasn't facts. People weren't coming to me for data-driven market research. They were coming to me for strategic ideas, which are grounded in facts, but go beyond them. And that's even in 2018, 2019, what these technologies were already doing. They were coming up with ideas. They were able to write stories. They were able to write forecasts in a simple form. And so I realized, well, I've either got to learn how to drive tractors or make tractors or do something with tractors, because this shovel is not going to cut it anymore. And that's really what this is a tractor for ideas, and a way to really scale up this engagement with qualitative information. And coming down to conversation, I think, is a good way to think about it, as long as you realize how much goes into a conversation. Well, what we mean by conversation isn't dialogue. A conversation involves movement. A conversation involves vision. A conversation involves hunch. It involves back and forth banter. It involves questioning. And also isn't an excuse we want to humanize the technology, but we don't want to anthropomorphize it. Yes. Not because anthropomorphization, thinking of it like a human, is dangerous, but because it's limiting. You forget that it can just as easily pretend to be a bash shell or an alien spaceship or a satellite or a Wi-Fi router as it can a human. And so you're limiting the kind of value and experience you can have with it by doing that.
Well, Jeremy, our profession, we are not known as being great communicators, conversationalists, a lot of things you just talked about. Is GenAI going to make that stand out even more? Or is it going to help us maybe close some of that gap and become better communicators?
Bob was one of the first to push my thinking around generative AI as a communication medium. And I think that's a really powerful tool for leaders to be able to translate your clarity into different languages, both entirely different languages, but also different personality types. Maybe you speak type A and you're talking to a type B personality, and you can use this interface to understand how would this person want to hear this? How could they hear my point more clearly? Maybe the person speaks the same language, but is from a different background from you. And instead of trying to guess what would land with them, you can get higher signal on that. But no matter what it's grounded in, your leadership clarity. It's just going to amplify the signal of your leadership. If you have mediocre leadership, it's going to scale your mediocrity. But if you have clarity, then it can scale that clarity broader and deeper in the organization. This is something that you think about, Gabe, with scalable foresight, and foresight being a tool for clarity. Maybe you could touch on that a bit.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, this whole notion of going to your organization and figuring out who's good at what, who is passionate about what, and saying there's no need for one person to do all of this, right? What we've learned from doing futures work, from doing strategic foresight, is that the best foresight, the best kind of forecast for the future are not done alone. They're not done by one person, one program, one idea. It really is a collection, an exchange, a conversation. And that's part of what inspired, I think, the three of us to work on this project together. Dan, I have to say here that, when it comes to the three of us, I was the known skeptic coming into this book. And, Bob and Jeremy both approached me and said, Gabe, we want you to join us on this. And I said, I'm willing to join under the condition that you understand that I'm going to ask some hard questions. I'm going to ask you to slow down. I'm going to take your excitement and try to poke holes in it because I've got some uncertainty. And who is willing to bring on a collaborator who is openly saying, I'm going to slow the process down? I think it speaks volumes about both Bob and Jeremy. But what ended up happening in doing that was just really getting that clarity of that future back view rather than the present forward, pushing our thinking and having discussions and dialogues with people in different industries, in different roles, and kind of thinking about, well, what really becomes the clarity here?
You guys are giving me great hope for the future with your book and this future back thinking. And, Bob, I think it would be important for us to chat about kind of the bigger context. And I want to take some credit I shouldn't take, but I think next to you, I might be the one who's talked more about VUCA than anybody else on the planet in the last 10, 15 years, because you taught it to me. But VUCA, volatility, uncertainty, complexity, and ambiguity. And I ask roomfuls of CIOs all the time, more VUCA in 3 years, less VUCA? 100%. Everyone's like, more VUCA. So park that for a second. There's something new that you're working on, a new way of thinking about this called BANI. Can you talk about what that is and why that's important?
Sure. And we found VUCA very useful. It was developed at the Army War College in the late 1980s. It was kind of post-Cold War period for understanding geopolitics. It became very useful after 9/11 to help us prepare for uncertainty. But there was this big assumption built into VUCA that I've realized now as I've used it for a long time. The big assumption was the future is knowable if only we find the right data, if only we find the right expert, if only we bring things together, we'll be able to know where things are going. And that actually was accurate. And in a real sense, we found it and used it successfully for that period of time. But just last summer, we realized at Institute for the Future, and Gabe and Jeremy and I realized that and built this into our new book, VUCA is not VUCA enough for what's going to happen over the next decade. And we can't assume that this future, this emerging future, is knowable. It's better to assume that this is something new. So it's brittle, and some of our systems that look stable are actually brittle. And when they break, brittle systems don't just break, they shatter. They shatter. So like the bridge across Baltimore Harbor, when it was rammed by a cargo ship, it looked strong until it was rammed by the cargo ship and it shattered. it's shattered. So we've got a lot of systems like that that look strong but are actually brittle, including more subtle systems like how we govern ourselves. How that looks strong, but is it really? Then we've got the notion of anxious. The world is anxious in ways we've never really seen on this scale before, particularly kids, young people, more anxious, more concerned. And we as leaders have to acknowledge that and engage with that. The idea of nonlinear, the scientists talk about hysteresis, the kind of lags between what we do and what we see as results. And particularly with regard to climate, we may do the right thing and not see the impact for 5 years or 10 years or beyond. And our minds just aren't set up for that, for the nonlinear. And finally, incomprehensible. We've got phenomenon like what we're talking about right now with large language models. Even the developers don't know exactly what's happening inside. So in the whole area of what we call AI, but in the book, we talk about how the language isn't adequate. We've got this amazing new technology, but it's more like alchemy. In other words, it's partly tech and partly magic because we don't understand it yet. Uh, and we're dealing with that kind of world. So words are powerful and words are helpful to describe what's going on and then to imagine a better future. We've just concluded that VUCA isn't enough anymore. It served its purpose. Let's put it to bed. There's got to be a new frame on the future. And we use it in this book. And then I'm developing another book with the guy who coined the term, Jemay Kashil, and Angela Davis, the head of United Way Worldwide, who's seeing the Bonnie world globally now already. So that book will come out this fall, and I hope I'll get to come back and talk to you about that.
Amazing. You guys just keep pumping out amazing work. And, Gabe, I want to pull you back. I want to pull in our resident skeptic here. Okay. So basically, we just heard Bob talking about Bonnie.
We like to say Bonnie because in Europe and in other parts of the world, Banny sounds too American and too California, and we want it to be a global concept. So we've tested out the pronunciation, and Bonnie seems to be more able to be communicated well.
Perfect. Well, words matter, pronunciation matters, Gabe. So, Gabe, given all this, talk some more about why, as a cynic, you've got this optimism about being augmented by GenAI.
Yeah, Dan, I think there's a lot of sentiment out there, perhaps rightfully so, that GenAI has the potential to dehumanize us, that it has the potential to eliminate jobs, that it has the potential to make us lazy, to, amplify things that we don't want amplified. But I think the way that we talk about it in the book, the way that we're writing about this, the way that we're thinking about this is, because we're doing future back work, because we're looking 10 plus years into the future, 10 years is a long time, at least from where I'm sitting today. 10 years is a long time, and we don't have to be passive passengers into the future. We can be active in making sure that we're deploying this correctly, that we're learning from this correctly, that we're having exchanges correctly. And rather than just letting this technology or, those that are churning out the technology just kind of choose for us, we can push back, we can revamp, we can actually restructure this in a way that humanizes us in a way that we've never seen before. And I think that's something that I've learned from Jeremy. That's something that I've learned from Bob. That's something that I've learned from, my interactions with generative AI itself, is that, it's not just doom and gloom. We don't have to be passive. We can actually be active. We've given ourselves a 10-year roadmap. A lot of what you see today is what I call, companies and especially CTOs and CIO leaders have this overwhelming sense of FOMO, this fear of missing out of, we know it's a big thing. We know it's probably not going to go away. We don't know what we should be doing, but we know we better get in it. And we're just going to throw a lot of money. We're going to throw a lot of resources. We're going to guess a lot of the time, and hopefully we'll see what sticks and make sense of it then, right? And I think that's a very dangerous approach. I think that's the wrong approach. Kind of take a step back and ask yourself, how do we actually want to implement this in order to rehumanize or further humanize efforts. And that's what we talk about in the book. That's what we go around talking to leaders about is, you don't have to be passive and let this technology dehumanize you. You can actually be an active participant in framing how this technology actually plays out.
That's good. Gabe, a lot of my CEO friends who are retiring, they talk about JOMO. Actually, how are they getting their operational roles? It's the joy of missing out. They're finding the joy. So that's where things are going for those folks. But none of them are retiring. They're all rewirement, as Andy Karabutis says in an upcoming podcast. But Bob, human calming. You talked earlier about things are so noisy, and I don't think anybody would disagree with you. It's just the world's noisier than ever, faster than ever. We know it's going to get even crazier. The skill, one of the 10 skills is this human calming. So talk about the essential, why that's so essential in the rise of AI in the workplace.
Sure. And this is a lesson I've learned as I've gotten older, and it's important to note on our team of authors, we're very cross-generational, and I think that's a message to communicate to your listeners is cross-generational work about topics like this is particularly valuable because there is a wisdom to age and there's a wisdom to growing up with tech. There's different kinds of insight from different kinds of experiences. It's really, really important to understand what's going on. But one of my big takeaways about generative AI is that calming is where we have to begin. What our intention has to come from inside of us. And the more we are able to center and calm ourselves, the more we're able to make good decisions. And we talk in the book a lot about Kentaro Toyama's work. He was the first leader of the Microsoft lab in India, and he was one of the advocates for the $100 laptop. And he calls himself now a reformed technology optimist because he said, that didn't work. They brought cheap tech to poor people, expecting that would bring them out of poverty, and it didn't work. It didn't work. And what he said is, you can't just bring in the tech. You have to say, what's your intention? And that begins with human calming. And then what's your discernment? What are the choices that you want to make? And then it's self-control or that kind of discipline of using it. And what I've learned, I used to be a basketball player when I was young. And one of the big takeaways from my experience with basketball is the idea of shooting free throws. And it's the way I now think about human calming. It's the way I think about the use of GenAI. When you're shooting a free throw, it looks so simple. You're 15 feet away from the basket. Nobody's guarding you. And yet it's really hard. And it gets harder if there's 16,000 people in the seats. It gets harder if it's the end of the game and you've got a chance to tie or win. So it's both muscle memory and discipline and technique, and it's mental and human calming. You'll notice every good free throw shooter takes a deep breath before shooting and calms himself or herself before shooting. But it's both muscle and technique, and it's discipline and it's repetition over and over and over. That's what we have to do to make sense out of Gen AI. We have to be calm, we have to be clear, and we have to be ready to do a repetitive task over and over and over again. That's why I leave Stretch up all day, as you do with your Sparky. And that's the way to do it. It's a discipline of using it. It's a discipline of calm. But the calm begins in ourselves, not in the tech. It's got to come from us.
Incredible. Love the free throw analogy. And I saw a recently I saw a picture of you, college basketball player, playing against Lou Alcindor, who became
Kareem Abdul-Jabbar, and it was my moment of truth in the old Chicago Stadium. It was the point where I realized I had gone as far as I could with my leadership on the basketball court, and I was an all-state high school player. I got a scholarship to Illinois, but I was a marginal player in Illinois, and I wasn't good enough to be a pro. So I had to come up with takeaways, and I had to go to graduate school and figure out how to be a futurist and what to do next. But the takeaway for me is this importance of something that looks simple, but is actually difficult. And that metaphor of free throws is, for me, another way to try to understand what's going on with Gen AI and how we can make the best out of it.
Yeah, yeah. Human calming. I think every golfer on the first tee box would
Yes.
benefit from that, right?
Yeah, or putting. Putting is a lot like shooting a free throw.
True. Yeah, very true. Well, human calming is one of the 10 skills. I'm glad we got to that. And I wanted to get a little creative, have a little fun here. So I reached out to some industry thought leaders, people I have high regard for in different ways, and asked them, what skills of these 10 would you like to hear about? And so I'm going to just quickly read to you what a couple of things that I heard. So this first one is from Dr. Lisa Palmer. She's the CEO of Dr. Lisa AI, one of the top AI strategists in the country. So this is her space. I mean, she's brilliant. So Dr. Lisa wanted you to talk about immersive learning. And so maybe we'll have Jeremy do this. And she says, immersive learning is essential for executive leadership. She worked with a cohort of 12 CEOs who were seeking GenAI training so they could lead from a place of personal understanding. They could have easily, as we all know, they could have delegated that. Someone else go do the exploration, right? But they dug in first. They immersed. They dug in firsthand, and they benefit from that. So, she says that leaders who take this hands-on approach gain the insight needed to navigate AI's rapid evolution and drive real business impact. So, Jeremy, take it away. Talk about immersive learning in the context you just heard.
She's completely right that leaders need to be hands-on with this technology in a way that they haven't been with other technology. And I don't mean to trivialize how difficult this is. As a senior leader, you have a lot to do and a lot to focus on. And someone coming along and telling you that you're supposed to play around with generating images with an AI on a screen is a hard sell. You have a lot to do, but it is necessary because there are no experts on this. At the beginning, you called me a generative AI guru, and what other technology could anyone plausibly apply anything close to that word for something that's only existed for 4 or 5 years? And so it is tough, but it is necessary. We don't have good stories for how this tech works or good understanding of what it does. And so to lead strategy around it, you need to. But it also is a powerful tool for creating immersive learning. For instance, with Institute for the Future every year does a 10-year forecast about a big global cross-industry view on where the future is going. And so this year with them, we created What Ifpedia. And so this is a Wikipedia from the future grounded in the 10-year forecast that Institute for the Future did. And so far, it creates articles that are scenarios from this future in 2035 that Institute for the Future forecasted in this report. This is a way of immersing people in that future. Now, in the past, IFTF researchers would write scenarios, stories from the future of the forecast that they'd done. And the researchers could write 2 or 5 or 10. So far, we have 1,600 articles generated with What Ifpedia. They are all grounded in the original forecast. And Dan, every single scenario and article is consistent with every other one. It is a single collaborative, cohesive world that is being built by anyone that interacts with it. And everyone that interacts with it gets to connect the forecast to the thing that they're most interested in. So for some people, that's electric vehicles. For some people, that's leadership. For some people, that's cats. And, we work with a lot of pet food companies. That's a non-trivial topic. So this is a way of immersive learning that's very powerful, that So there's two things here. One, as a leader, you can immerse yourself in possible futures. Institute for the Future does 10 years out futures, but maybe you're working on a 3-year out strategy. Maybe you're working on a present day strategy that goes outside your comfort zone, that's in a new growth market. You can immerse yourself in a very high fidelity, very coherent way to understand scenario planning in a much different and expanded way, as well as being able to offer this kind of immersive learning to more people in the organization. It's cheap to create these scenarios. Every scenario that we create costs cents. In the past, you could invest immersive learning opportunities only into people up at the top levels of the organization because it was costly to bring them to a location, to surround them with something. In the military, for instance, has a kind of massive video gaming parlor in the Mojave Desert where there's real helicopters, there's people dress up as adversaries, and you go there and immerse yourself in those locations before deploying, and it's designed to be harder than real battle. This is extremely expensive, very valuable, but very expensive. That's the subtle, the what could have been the tagline to Leaders Make the Future, is that leaders make the future, but in the future, there will be many more leaders. More people in your organization will be leaders.
Right.
Because with generative AI, you can give people the learning and the resources and the information that they need so that when the time comes and they are the right person on the ground with the right clarity and the right in the right place, the right time, they can be that leader. You can resource them to do that. And immersive learning is a big part of that.
So you advise a lot of companies around the world. You're in boardrooms, you all are. Jeremy, I'm just curious to kind of build on what you just shared. If I'm company X, I'm pet food company X, what steps would I take to build this pedia within my company to create this incredible thought leadership, it sounds like?
Yeah, we work with individual CEOs on augmented leadership coaching, which is about how do you articulate your clarity, and then how do you get that into whatever system you're using. And so we go from the big 10 years out view of who do I want to be as a leader in 10 years to where exactly do I copy paste this paragraph into the prompt in my Microsoft Copilot in PowerPoint in order to actually infuse that into the speech I'm about to give. Because you got to get down to the details. At an organizational level, it's just never treat. You get these consulting reports internally and externally from Institute for the Future or McKinsey or whoever. These are no longer static things. Never treat them as static. Expand on them. Speak with them. Upload it somewhere and go into a dynamic conversation with them. Every set of ideas and scenarios can be a living, breathing thing that infuses throughout your organization and can get to people in different ways. And you can do that with off-the-shelf tools, or we and others build ones that are customized to a set of ideas and reports in order to bring them to life in a nuanced way.
Kind of light the fuse there. Well, Dr. Lisa, once again, you sparked a great bit of conversation. So thank you for that. And so, guys, my second person here, just brilliant CIO. Bhaskar Ramachandran is the CIO for PPG. So think innovative coatings company, paint, they are brilliant. And Bhaskar is just such a thinker. Bob, I'll have you take this next one after a little bit of backdrop from Bhaskar. So talking about the depolarizing skill, Bob. And Bhaskar says, in all of human history, all leaders are measured on and known for what they get done or influence, even the bad ones. So one of the key or most valuable skills to me is the GSD skill, get stuff done skill, without compromising on one's innate values. AI and GenAI can help us with reasoning skills and validate patterns that humans may not easily be able to do. So hence, intuition may be less valuable skill in many contexts than today. What's the AI's deterministic and probabilistic do not, and I'm not sure if they ever will, possess the GSD skill. motivate a team or an entire digital IT function to mobilize the masses towards a singular goal and cross the finish line. And Bosco went on to say, the other skill is provide a listening ear, a crying shoulder, and provide comfort to another human, or even celebrate and experience collective joy. Let me just kind of leave it there. So given the polarizing world we live in, that seems to be getting more polarizing with almost every news article, the depolarizing skill is very valuable. Guy's brilliant. What do you think?
Uh, I think he's right in the sense that we're in a very polarized time, and our skills are they all have the word augmented in front of them, so it's augmented depolarizing, and what we're doing is using generative AI to help understand the other side of the polarity. So, what you want as a leader is not to get stuck in the polarity. If you want to get stuff done, you've got to understand the polarity, but be able to move past it. So, you got to avoid choosing sides. You've got to understand the other point of view. What augmentation can do is help you understand how other people are thinking. So you can say, how does this look from their point of view? How does this look from their point of view? And then model that. And essentially, it's a kind of immersive learning again, augmented immersive learning, because you're trying to learn the other points of view. And augmented depolarization links very closely with augmented commons creating, because you then think future back and you say, what do we have in common? We've got these polarities, we've got these differences, but what do we have in common? And then you go future back and you stay out of the fight. You get into looking for the commonality, and then you work backwards and say, okay, we both want this. So how do we get there?
What a great teaching. That's going to get us a long ways, Bob, right? If we can start there. And,
Yeah.
in our profession too, the other thing is maybe this will help, but, most people in our profession tend to be listen to respond. They're not listening
Yes.
to learn or understand, right? So
Hmm.
we'll crack that code. Good stuff. Gabe, I want to throw a couple of last ones at you. And this first one, and by the way, Bhaskar, thank you again. I'm going to be featuring Bhaskar here on the podcast this spring. So can't wait. Going to go to Pittsburgh and record them.
Great.
Will Markow, good friend of mine, somebody who should be at the Institute. He's one of these rock star brilliant people like you all. Um, he's really all about future ready talent and thinking about people and skills and what's going to take to be successful. So very, very aligned with this. But he says, contrary to popular belief, generative AI has the potential to make work more human, not less. You've been talking about this.
Yeah.
By commoditizing the rote accumulation of knowledge, Gen AI will force many leaders to shift their focus from how they're doing things to why they are doing them, placing a premium on sound human judgment. We're already seeing this shift reflected in the workforce as jobs requesting AI skills, he's got the data, are over twice as likely to request critical thinking and problem solving skills compared to other jobs. So, Gabe, what say you on this whole future back curiosity skill set?
Yeah, well, first off, thank you, Will, for that comment. I think it's spot on. What Will has identified here is what we call a signal of change. We're used to talking about drivers of change, trends, macro trends, mega forces. These are, well-established phenomenon that we can say as we think about the future, there's a strong indication that those trends will continue, that they'll bleed into the future. But what Will is presenting is a signal of change. It's a small kind of moment in the present that doesn't fit the normal trend lines, that doesn't fit the normal conversations, our mental models for how we think about well-established drivers of change. But it's an interesting point that we should be paying attention to, because what we know is that signals start off small, but accumulate and over time become the drivers of the future, become the trends, the macro forces, and become the reality of the future. So what Will has, I think identified here is a signal of change and saying we're seeing something new happening here and we should continue to track it. And that's exactly why we called out the skill of augmented future back curiosity, of kind of thinking, of being able to ask questions, and not just questions of what do we do moving forward, but how, let's jump out to the future, ask ourselves, how do we make sense of the uncertainty and think through about our strategy moving forward? Our goal is that in 10 years' time, futures thinking, strategic foresight will be just as widespread and as popular as design thinking is today, as it has been for the last decade, that it really is going to become a skill that is taught, that is required, that is highly sought after. And hopefully, I think Jeremy and Bob have convinced me, but hopefully will be a skill that will be aided and augmented with generative AI.
So good. Will, thank you for that. Will's at a company now called Cyber Warrior, doing all kinds of workforce, great stuff. Will is somebody that I saw him testifying in front of Congress and at the White House more than I've seen anybody, because he's like the go-to person for a lot of these things around cyber and talent. But thank you, Will. Fourth question, I'm going to come back to you, Gabe. I think this is a good one for you. This is the clarity skill, kind of goes hand in hand, right? And Martha Heller, everyone knows Martha in our industry, author, industry thought leader. She's the CEO of a company by her name, Heller Search. And Martha's just awesome. I love her. We have fun. We collaborate. But Martha says, in the age of AI, the only skill that matters is the ability to turn data into value. For most large industrial companies, the current reality is data everywhere, but not a drop of value. The other side of this data to value curve is where data is value, whether that's a platform business, data as a new revenue stream, or someday, not far off in the distance, a company run without people. Okay, so just kind of bend your mind there, Gabe. So the ability to move the dial from data to value, regardless of the starting point, is the target outcome. So she says around the clarity skill, the profile of specifically around boards, the profile of our boards of directors must change if we're going to imagine a very different future and design our businesses accordingly. Board level influence has never been as important as today, which adds a very challenging layer to the CIO's change management agenda. So you're in all those spaces, Gabe. What say you?
Yeah, Martha, that's a lot to unpack there, but it's also powerful. It's also great. Thank you for that. When we think about this skill in particular here, I have to go back to the table we showed earlier of the present forward versus the future back. A lot of what I think Martha is pointing to is there's this whole notion of wanting efficiency and speed. When it comes to work, when it comes to data, when it comes to technology systems, all we've really cared about is, can we do it faster? So that's the speed part, and can we do it more efficiently? Right? Can we do it with less people? Can we do it with less power? What we've learned from thinking about this in the future back view is really the potential here is for effectiveness and calm, right? I mean, in today's world where all of our systems are tightly coupled and incredibly complex, going fast and breaking something has lasting consequences. And we've seen this time and again, but even more so today, those consequences, it should no longer be acceptable to say, oops, we broke something and we'll just deal with the consequences, right? We really have to be mindful about that. But more importantly, I think shifting from efficiency and speed towards effectiveness, right? What if we went slow, but we're so much more effective than we've ever been? Who's to say that that would be something bad, that we failed with this technology, that we failed as leaders? And so I think the skill really is talking about that shift there. The data versus getting value from data, kind of turning that into, is that whole question of how can we be more effective? How can we use generative AI and this skill of looking for clarity to be a lot more effective as leaders? Bob talks a lot about clarity versus certainty. Certainty, we know, in the Bonnie world does not work. Certainty in the Bonnie future is going to get you in trouble. Being very certain about things is very polarizing. Being very certain about things can be very detrimental to you, to your organization, to the communities in which you operate. Being very clear, however, gives you the freedom and the flexibility, right? We talk about the book. There's this great part in the book where Bob is talking to Stretch, and he asks Stretch to talk about the difference between clarity versus certainty, and Stretch kind of responds and says, well, certainty makes you stand your ground, and you almost have to defend your position against anything that happens. But clarity is a lot more freeing, it's a lot more flexible, and allows you to respond to whatever disruption arises. And so this whole the skill of augmented clarity is really leaning into being very clear of where you want to be in the future, but very flexible in how it is that you get there.
You just made a lot of people really uncomfortable, Gabe, and I like it. Myself included, right? So many people grew up having that confidence and that certainty, right? And so good. So Martha, once again, you sparked a great conversation, some great sharing. Jeremy,
So Dan,
one more I'd like
if I could
please.
just jump in there and bridge to Jeremy a little bit, when she talks about the link between data and value, that reminds me of smart mob swarming. And I know you want to talk about that a bit, but it seems to me, and her notion of companies that are basically digital, what are called DAOs, the sort of digitally automated organizations, that's been a vision that's been around for quite a while, and it's now becoming imaginable. And it's happened in small scale ways. And we do have a few boards now with non-human participants on the board who typically don't have decision making, but they have input to it. But I wonder, Jeremy, if you could say a little bit about smart mob swarming and that skill we talk about augmented smart mob swarming.
The way that teams will be structured in a world of agents is going to be a lot different. And this will hit hardest in the realm of the CIO because no domain will be changed more fundamentally than software development. And so thinking 10 years out, leading an IT organization or leading an organization generally will be less like running a machine or leading a group of people in a specific mechanical way, and will be much more like regulating a financial market where you're trying to guide a big interactive group of some automated participants, some human participants. Information will flow through it. And it is not intractable, but it is not possible to micromanage. And it is not possible to intervene in direct ways. You will have to guide it with clarity through external levers and rely on your ability to influence from your position to guide it towards value creation. So this is something that we've done before. It's not something completely new, but it's going to go much deeper in principle inside of organizations. We'll have to take the way that we think about economies and markets and apply it to the way that we think about running a company. So that's kind of the social view. On a day-to-day level, this also just means that team structure in a nearer term view. Let's bring the in the next 2-3 years, because software is kind of changing under our feet with tools like Cursor and things like that, and Bolt.new, these kind of generative assists, these co-pilots and beyond. And something that will shift for us in the near term, maybe the next 3 years, is that something is going to come after agile. If waterfall was what served project-based development in a world of servers, and agile was what served iterative development in a world of CI/CD pipelines where you can iteratively commit, then liquid development is what will serve us in the world of generative AI. In this world, roles are constantly shifting. Sometimes your user is developing the software alongside you. Sometimes your project manager is a machine. And sometimes we have the traditional structure that we're used to in Agile, where you have like the voice of the customer being kind of promoted by a project manager to developers. But it's going to be liquid and in flux. Sometimes the software itself will be iterating on itself. And so we're going to have these swarms of smart mobs that are working together that we can guide, but we'll have to think about it very differently. And the principles of team structure will have to change a lot.
So what's the term I'm thinking? The CIO and IT is going to become the new HR function overseeing all these different team members.
You'll be like the informational Federal Reserve of your organization.
Gotcha. Good way to put it. Gabe, I want you. We're kind of winding down here, Gabe. I want you to kind of put a bow on this for us and help us think about how to use this book. This is a very usable book. I've been using it a lot, right? So how would you use your book?
Yeah, Dan. Well, I would say the first step is to read it. The global on sale date, the book ships March 4th, I think, right as this podcast comes out. So you can go on Amazon, you can go on IFTF's website, you can go to our book publisher, Barrett Kohler, and get yourself a copy. So the first step is to read it. But like all good futures work, this book is meant to spark conversation. This book is meant to spark new ideas. This book is meant to spark insights that will hopefully lead to potential action. At the end of the book, kind of the last chapter after our conclusion, we have a discussion guide where if you're interested in bringing this to other people, if you're interested to bringing this to other leaders, other colleagues, folks within your organization, if you're running your own workshop, if you want to call on IFTF to help you run a workshop, there's a great list of questions. And, it's all framed around foresight, insight, action, which is the model that we use here at the Institute for the Future. So, this really is meant for you to have dialogue, to have conversation. I know we're talking to CIOs, but in case there are others out there listening and looking who haven't had a chance to explore and experiment with generative AI platforms, generative AI programs, read the book and figure out and see if you yourself can shift from the present forward way of thinking and interacting with these systems towards the future back view, right? Don't just go over the prompts and the answers. Go to have those hour-long conversations. Go to have those discussions and kind of bring others into the fold. The Institute for the Future, we are the world's longest continually running futures thinking organization out there. We started off primarily as a research organization, producing research, giving people our outside in perspective and our expertise on topics. Within the last decade, we've pivoted. We continue to do research and kind of give folks our thinking. But now we also have an entire arm of the Institute that's devoted to teaching people the skills of foresight. So you can go look up our Foresight Essentials portfolio. There are trainings in a variety of different formats, kind of self-paced, online, in person. The intersection of design thinking and futures thinking, the basics of futures thinking, the three horizons of AI, and kind of what are going to be the waves of that. We are constantly looking for partners and partnerships, folks who want to come in and say, we want to take your book and we want to create an offering out of this. We want to take your book and bring it to our organization. I have had folks who have reached out to me and said, we're assigning it for a monthly book club once it comes out. And so we're going to have discussions. And whether you do that on your own or you bring the Institute for the Future, Jeremy, Bob, or myself, I think the best thing you can do is to have a conversation, to have a future-backed conversation, to develop your clarity and moderate your certainty.
Yeah, I would highly recommend that. Go to the site. Something you said earlier, Gabe, too, about take the time, right? Because that's when maybe Jeremy said it, but just that's where the rich ideas come as you get into these things. And, Bob, I asked the question when we started this process, the book came out yesterday. I said, is there something fun we could do for our audience? And you said, we will do, I'm going to quote you now. So you said, we'll do 5 free pro bono workshops, 90-minute workshops, virtual, for the first 5 companies that will buy 100 copies of the book and actually use it. So did I get the offer right? This is kind of a special for the Tech Whispers audience.
Yeah, exactly. We thought we'd like to try this. We want to spread the word. We want to get the ideas about the book out quickly. Normally, if we do a 90-minute workshop virtually, normally it's somewhere between 15 and 30K to do that, depending on the mix of people doing it and whether we had someone live in the room. But we're offering, just if you buy 100 copies of the book, which costs $2,000, just 2K, we're offering a free workshop. So let's give it a try and see what kind of impacts we can have.
Well, I think this is going to go very fast. So I'm excited for the first 5. I wish I was one of them, but the friends and family can't play, right? So, but if people want to contact me, I'll be happy to be the conduit. Reach
Great.
out to me on through the website or through my LinkedIn profile, and I'll make sure
Cool.
that we get those to you ASAP and gladly. So, well, Bob and Gabe and Jeremy, always a blast hanging out with you guys. I feel smarter again. I'm actually less fearful when I'm with you,
Good.
and I'm more optimistic.
Good.
And I want people to tell us, we've got Stretch, we've got Sparky. What's your name, right? What's your name for your companion there? So, any last words? I'm gonna wrap this up here. But any closing thoughts? You guys covered a lot of ground. Thank you so much for today.
Well, I'm glad you're ending with a sense of hope, because that's the way we're thinking about the future. This is, in a real sense, the most frightening future we've ever explored, but in another sense, the most hopeful, that we've got the power to do things now we've never been able to do before. And our sense of this, like Tom Malone at MIT, our sense of this is the big story is not computers replacing people. The big story is humans and computers doing things together that have never been done before.
Amazing. The book is Leaders Make the Future. It's the 3rd edition. 75% new content. The subtitle, 10 New Skills to Humanize Leadership with Generative AI. Thank you so much. Good to see everybody. And
Thank you.
We will see you all again next time.